is running for city council, Patricia Byers. Good morning, Patricia. How are you?
Wonderful, Dave. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. Richard, I guess you're in her district.
Yes, I live in your district, and I'm not recusing myself from this interview.
That's right. We are accusing you in this interview, but you're not recusing yourself.
That's right.
Okay. What district is that, Richard?
3.
Number 3.
How many people in Yakima know their district? Raise your hand.
Not that many, I don't think, really, until the ballot shows up and they see whose names are on it. For the record, Patricia, you are running against who? Whom?
Tom Sund and Bernice Ponce.
Have you had? I mean, I had the pleasure of hosting a couple of forums that you were at.
Yes.
And gosh, you make a lot of sense.
Yes. Why do you want to sign up for this abuse? You make a lot of sense.
Let's start with that. There's a question for you right out of the. Even before you get that, give us a little bit about who Patricia Byers. I know your history. You've done a lot of interesting things. And the whole psychology part of it, I think, is truly what's needed to succeed in council work. But remind folks of who you are, what you've been up to these past few years.
Well, I have lived in Yakima for over 40 years. And during that time, I actually started my career here as a YMCA professional. I worked there until 1989, went back to graduate school, Central Washington University, got my master's in psychology, and then worked in the mental health field as a professional for 23 years until I retired.
A couple of different careers there.
Yes.
One, help get the body in shape and then get the mind in shape.
Well, and on top of that, there are a few council members that need their heads examined. So perfect.
Bang, perfect. Yeah.
I have, come to just love this city, and that's one of the primary reasons that I am running for city council. Having been here this long, Yakima has been a wonderful place for me to live. I've had a lot of benefit, and I love giving back. I try to do that in a lot of ways. Presently, I serve on the City Planning Commission, been there for since 2014, chaired it the last 2 years. I also work with the Yakima Chamber of Commerce. After being a member, I became an ambassador with the Chamber and actually won the Volunteer of the Award in 2013. I also volunteer with the Downtown Association and serve on the design committee there. I worked downtown Yakima for a number of years in the YMCA, one of the personal companies I worked with, and then my own practice in the Larson Building until I retired. Love downtown Yakima. I also volunteer with, who else?
You can stop right there. The point being, you're not somebody that says they love Yakima. You're somebody who rolled up her sleeves and went to work on behalf of that which you love. You have let your actions do your talking for all these years by being involved. Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement.
Well,
why exactly is it culminating in running for city council? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish if you're elected that hasn't been done or isn't being done?
Well, I, for one, believe that Yakima has a very bright future. We have so much potential for what the city can become, even beyond what we are. And I want to be a part of that. I get along well with others. I can talk about things reasonably and respectfully. I'd like to be a part of directing the future of Yakima in a healthy way. So that's part of why I'm running. I feel called to run. Really, I feel called to run.
yeah, I don't think people get involved in as many things as you have without there being some kind of drive in you that says this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
I mean, think about being on the planning commission and directing it even the last couple of years. You see an awful lot of the detail of what's going on in Yakima in terms of development and sort of the philosophical thoughts of people about investing in Yakima. I mean, you were in a perfect position there to really have an information base as you consider the future of Yakima. And I think it's important that you pointed out, as good as we are, we can be better.
Yes.
Because this isn't, a lot of people want to say we suck and we need to be better, but that's not what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think there are many wonderful things. You know, as long as I have lived here, one of the things I've observed about Yakima, and I've lived many places all over California before I moved here, many cities, this is probably the most generous city I have ever lived in. in terms of people volunteering, and certainly in terms of monetary donations, nonprofit work. It just amazes me all the time how generous the people in the city are.
Pat, the one of the outcomes of the ACLU lawsuit was now we're all district, no at-large positions anymore. And one of the potential problems with that is a council person representing the district to a greater extent than they represent Yakima. How do you feel about that? How are you going to handle that inevitable conflict when you're doing something you think is right for your district, but maybe overall for the city that isn't the case?
Well, my response to that would be, when you are on the city council, you are part of the government of the municipality, and so the decisions you make are going to affect everyone in the city, and that has to be the overall view. Certainly, I have a heart for the district I live in. I love District 3. It's just hardworking families who really want the best for themselves, their children. I think it's that way in every district, but it's kind of, I feel uniquely about District 3.
Must be very tolerant because they put up with Richard. That's what I would say about it. But that's just
We live several blocks from each other.
okay. Got it. All right. Distance makes the heart grow fonder. I get it.
But I've had some conversations with people in the district, and I've had people calling me and emailing me, asking me my opinions about different things, and most of them really do have to do with overall city issues. And I think that people in my district understand that. I think that they will probably say, I'd like to see you do this, I'd like to see you do that. But most of the questions and conversations that, as people approach me, really have to do with our city.
Do you think that the current form of government is the most appropriate form or can work? Or has Yakima reached a point population-wise where we might benefit from a change in the form of government?
Well, I think when we moved to an all-district form of government, it was quite a shift. It was a difficult adjustment, I think, for the city to make in terms of understanding. And I think that because we were all district, that sometimes the thought is, you're going to bring just strictly your district opinion ideas and work in. And so there was, I think, a lot of angst in city council about that. We really saw that played out, I believe, in city council to some degree.
Some of the people who are running right now, Patricia, not to interrupt, but to tell you that have sat at these microphones and said, predominantly, I'm for my district. And that's what I'm elected by. That's who I serve. So what you're saying, the adjustment and stuff, this next wave of people, several of them already expressed that it's my district first. And the reason I think Richard asked you that question is because for the populace at large, they want to know that the city is people's top priority, I believe.
I believe so, too, and that's my point of view. That would be my point of view coming onto the council, is that our top priority is for the function of the city itself and the prosperity of the city itself overall. Although we want to look at certain district issues, those things are important. We have to look at big picture, how everything is going to affect the city. Is that going to bring us to a change in the future? There's a possibility.
Okay. Boy, Richard, you're getting asked all the good, meaty questions over there.
I got another one.
I'm
Okay.
impressed. Let's
I got
see
another
what
one.
you can trot it out.
Whenever you hear a presentation about the state of the city or the state of the county, and when we talk about financial information, budget information, the biggest item, the thing that sucks up the most resources and money is law enforcement. It's 3/4 of the budget. Is that just the reality? I mean, we're astonished when we see that because it's not something that we think about every day. But is that just the way it is? It's important enough that we have to spend 3/4 of our budget on it? Or are we doing something wrong?
Even to add to that question, not only do we not see it every day, most of us aren't touched by law enforcement and law and justice every day. Mm-hmm. So to think that 3/4 of the dollar of each tax dollar we send in never even affects our world makes it even more frustrating.
Well, and I suppose that's why we don't feel it, because it's 3/4 of the budget. So maybe it's working. I don't know.
Well, I think that 3/4 of the budget is public safety, And I think, that's maybe a better way to look at
Okay.
it. It includes the fire department, the police department. It includes a lot of things. We maybe not think about it until we hear the siren going down the street and wonder, hey, what's going on? Yesterday I'm driving up 40th Avenue and there's a 3-car accident. So then we think about, but there is a problem in our community. We have a lot of violent crime, and having met with and talked to different times with our new police chief, Matt Murray, that his number one focus is the violent crime in our community and bringing that down. That does take resources. We have slots for police officers in the department that are not even filled yet. And I think one of the things that needs to happen if we're going to combat violent crime and also take care of the other things that are going on that need that, we're going to need to fill those slots. And I'm sure the fire department could give you a list of the things that they need to happen as well. So it is a huge part of the budget, but it's part of the overall functioning of our city in terms of being a safer place to be.
How do you balance that with the other side of things, and that's providing for the good? I remember Councilwoman Gutierrez a couple years back. We were talking about summer programs, and her motion resulted in dipping into reserves for $50,000 to have another 100 kids be able to attend a couple of weeks of summer activities in the city. Is that the city's job? Is that where my tax money should go so that kids can go to a summer camp? Is that what's your view of the role of government in terms of providing for enrichment and opportunity?
Quality of life.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that.
Yeah, I think that there is a certain amount of value in looking at quality of life issues in the city. And certainly when we talk about an East Side pool, for example, that would be a quality of life issue. So, I think there's always room to talk about those things. But here is my challenge. There are so many wonderful organizations within the city. There are so many faith-based, opportunities and resources within the city. So, for example, I know that most of the schools, at least 19 of the schools in our city, have been adopted by local churches who go in and they provide supplies, they do reading, they can go along to help with field trips. They are in the schools, like having breakfast with kids, talking with kids, being there to support kids. So that's a fabulous resource, and we have a lot of that resource within our city that we can use to really provide opportunity, to provide certainly early prevention in gang and early intervention in children that might go toward that direction because of whatever issues are in their home and their life, to have that kind of solid support. And that's just one example of things, that are available in this community as a resource that don't necessarily have to come out of the city pocketbook.
That's an excellent point. The founding fathers saw that government had a very limited role, but really felt that because we are out of many one, that we would lift each other up. That would be a human thing and not I'm a tax Richard, so I can send your kid to a camp. And I think that was kind of the founding way this went. And you're right. I know the church that I attend, they have adopted a school. And everybody takes some pride in that they are, because most of us don't know how we can help as individuals, right? How can we do something? Unless you're part of an organization, you don't really know. But to be able to uplift the school through some donation and some time, it's a good thing. Patricia, I hope you can stay after the bottom of the hour. We want to ask you a few more questions.
Absolutely.
As we work our way towards 8 o'clock. So appreciate very much you being here. And Yakima, tune in, because she's got a lot of interesting things to say. You're tuned to the Source, the Valley's Newstalk leader, where it is 7:30. AM 1280 Newstalk, KIT, Friday, 19th day of July. Our political conversations continue. The primary's coming up early August, and we're heading into late July, so you'll be having decisions to make in each of your districts, wherever you may roam. District 3, candidate Patricia Byers in the studio this morning, along with Richard Miller, filling in for Lance. Good morning, gang. How are we doing?
We are doing terrific.
How about you, sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Very much. I know you are. You always are, Richard. You're very positive. And Patricia, I know you to be always very positive as well. And maybe that's your psychological background, some of the training and just life experiences that in terms of always looking for the positive. You don't always find it, but I tell you what, you look for the negative and you'll always find that, right? So one is a search with some surprises maybe, and the other is a guaranteed bummer. Got to ask you some of the questions that will sort of represent ideologically where you're at. Here's the thing. Nonpartisan office. You're not supposed to have to be able to, it's not that you don't have to. They don't ask you to declare if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or any of those kinds of things. But if we've learned anything in the last couple of council cycles, those philosophies drive some of the decisions that you make. It'd be nice if we had a truly nonpartisan deal where we can set all that aside and say, the city's where I'm coming from. Let's just work about that. So some of the issues, the ice flight thing, council still wants to meet with the folks from ICE and talk about that. Big doings at the meeting this past Tuesday. What is your philosophical position on the ICE flights coming into Yakima using Yakima Airport?
The ICE flights coming into Yakima are the people working are doing their job. That's why they're here. They're not out into the community. They're not looking for anything different. They are here with a purpose. They're here for a transfer of personnel from one place to another. Mm-hmm. When they come into Yakima, that's what they do. The city of Yakima, our airport, we are funded by the FAA to a great degree, and we are contractually bound to that, to the federal government. When we are an FAA airport, we are contracted to receive any flight that's approved by FAA, and certainly these flights are. And we have also a private business person at the airport who is contracted to provide services for those flights and any flight coming in and out of the airport. So that, in my thinking, is what's happening, and we are bound to uphold that.
When people use the argument, so you're going for profits over people, be on the right side of history. Those were the things that were being chanted, if you will, the other night at the meeting. How do you see that separate from the specifics of a federally contractual obligation, or do you? Do you have feelings about that sort of thing one way or the other?
One of the things that I heard said is it's going to clarify, to the Latino community or the undocumented part of the Latino community where we stand or how we feel about them. And I feel like that's totally inaccurate, because when you take an oath for the office of the council person in the city of Yakima, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the state of Washington. And I would take that very seriously. That's an oath we take, and that's what we do. And so when we have ICE flights coming in, that's part of that agreement. That's part of the upholding of the Constitution and the federal law. That does not mean that I personally don't care about the people in our community, documented or undocumented, because that is not true. I do care about them, and I don't think it's putting profits over people. I think there really are two separate issues. A lot of the conversation has to do with what's happening on the borders and undocumented persons wanting to come into our country. Those are really two separate issues. I think that we have certainly a great need for immigration reform in our nation, but that takes place at a federal level. We don't make policy at a local level that's going to affect anything nationally. And I don't think we really need to separate those two things.
Pat, when I get pulled over for speeding,
regularly,
the officer, yes, it's happened. The officer usually asks me other things. Do I have a valid driver's license? Do I have insurance in force? Was I wearing my seatbelt? Those, and I could be charged with any of those things if I'm not complying. And I do you think that I don't see that differently with whether you're documented or undocumented. I do you think it's appropriate for the city to be taking a stance for the rest of us that our law enforcement people are not to ask about legal status in the United States?
That is a tough question because it's assuming, that it's either one way or another. And personally, I believe that there is room for some gray area only in terms of myself personally. If I were asked that question, I'm a citizen, of course I would answer. Other people, I can understand why they wouldn't want to answer that question because they're fearful if they are not documented. So, there's one camp, there's another camp. I believe there's a little leeway in the middle. And so when the police department says, I am not going to ask you that question, what I care about is more about your behavior than anything else. I can understand why people would want it to be that way, to give that leeway. I would not want to be undocumented on the other side of that question. On the other hand, it is true that we have a law in this country. We have laws and ways to enter our nation legally. And a lot of those laws have been broken because people come in undocumented or illegally. Or they come in documented and that documentation expires and they simply don't leave. So there's a lot of ways that happens. So my heart is that if someone wants to come into this country, I can understand why, living in some of the circumstances that they do and the conditions that they do in the country they come from, why they would want to be here. I probably would too. This is a wonderful country, and I think it's the greatest country on earth. I wouldn't live anywhere else. And so I can understand why they want to be here, for their safety, for their family, for their well-being. That's why immigration reform is so critical. We really do need immigration reform so that it is maybe more easily accessible, more reasonably accessible to come into the country legally and become a citizen. But there needs to be a clear pathway for that. And there is one now. It is just very difficult. And people aren't patient or don't feel safe in their country, or there's a lot of reasons they come across without documentation. So again, there is a rule of law, and I believe in the rule of law. But I also understand why people want to be here. I would want to be here.
Richard, all the times that you've badmouthed this country, you hear what she's saying. I hope you feel it. Just kidding. Richard, how about this? In terms of deportment, I mean, as a psychologist, you probably counseled people that weren't getting along. I mean, one of the things that the average Joe who doesn't follow all the nuances of this ordinance or that resolution, they do see what has been described by the Chamber of Commerce and others as bad behavior on our council. We've seen some just really ineffective interpersonal communication. Now we've got people being admonished for how they're conducting themselves on Facebook with one another. As you assess the council, what would you bring to that? Obviously, some of these players that are here now are going to be gone. But I think the districted system, by its very nature, promotes a certain amount of competition, right? If there's only so much to go around, and I'm feeling responsible to my district, then I got to position myself accordingly. How do you bring about greater civility, more effectiveness in this system with your background?
Well, for one, I'm a good listener, and I think that that is critical, to be able to listen to other people, to their point of view, to be able to not necessarily all the time just immediately jump in and disagree, but to say, I understand that, and understanding that, how can we, here's my position, my opinion, how can we move forward together on this? I think treating one another with respect, being able to listen, receive the other person's opinion, certainly, and clearly voice your own, but in a way that generates some healthy conversation and good outcome without any accusations or name calling, or I think the letter from the chamber said snarky remarks. Yeah. Those kinds of behaviors. It's like behaving in a respectful and adult manner.
We did have an incident where one of the council members who is not up for re-election, who will be coming back, was basically censured, if you will, by her fellow councilmates for behavior accumulated over time. That was passed as a way for council to try to rein itself in, if you will. Do you support that sort of idea, procedure? Some people have said that, the voice for that district has now been silenced, and that's, a violation of free speech and all of that. Others would say, look, in order to get any work done, we have to have a certain amount of what you just called adult respect and interaction. What's your take on the whole potential of censure and the fact that it was done and all of that?
Well, when it was done, I was surprised at the severity of the action, because this is a country where we are allowed to express our opinions. We need to do so in a respectful manner. That's my opinion anyway. We need to do so in a respectful manner. The fact that this particular council person, I think, asks a lot of questions, wants to clarify things. People have different ideas about how that occurs, how much time that takes up. But certainly it's within the right to do that. And I know that, part of the difficulty is the public isn't privy to conversations that happen in executive session. The public isn't privy to personal, private conversations that happen outside of council meeting. And so I think that the accumulation of a lot of things probably happen outside of the context of what is seen in city council. And so I think what we're seeing is the reaction to that. And the culminating factor seemed to be the question asked when the new chief of police was being introduced to the community, the timing of that question.
Sure.
To me, and the timing of that question probably was not greatly appropriate. There were other opportunities to discuss the issue that was brought up prior to the police chief being appointed. And so the timing, I think, was poor.
So that would fall under, proper adult behavior, meaning doing things at the right sequence at the right time for the greater good, which is, if you got that kind of question to ask it earlier. Or what do you do if you just come across that information towards the end? I guess the bottom line is you do feel that council has a right to police itself in that fashion, that there should be some sort of vehicle so that the council can maintain a certain decorum? Yes, no?
Yes, I think so. I think that that's appropriate. I think that there are certainly other things that have occurred where maybe censure should have been taken earlier for other council persons, other reasons.
Sure.
Like I said, when that happened, to me, it was just kind of surprising, the severity of it.
Right.
All of a sudden, here it is, and for this particular behavior, when there have been other behaviors that were not censored.
Exactly. Got about 3 minutes to go, Richard. Go
Sure,
ahead.
Pat, if you get elected by your district, the district is essentially electing you to be their spokesperson, right? So, do you vote the way you think is right, or do you vote the way your constituents want you to, if those two things are in conflict?
If they are in direct conflict, I think there's a lot of conversation I would need to have with individuals in my district who want to have that conversation. And I'm open to that. I've had people calling me already. I've had people emailing me already about particular issues, my point of view on this, my point of view on that. And I'm very open. One of the things I asked a friend when I was going to run, what are one of the things that you want to say about me? And she said, you're probably the most authentic person I know. What you see is what you get. And people always know where they are with you. And so I really appreciate that. And I see myself as being that way. Always willing to have the conversation. However, getting back to your original question, if it comes to what is better for the city overall or my district, as a council person, my responsibility is going to be the overall function of the city.
Got about a minute to go. When that thing hits 8, you're out. So give us the elevator speech, Patricia. You're trapped with Yakima in an elevator. You can speak to them all right now in your best 60-second. Why should they send you to the city council?
I believe that I have the experience in the community. I believe I have the heart for the community. I believe I have a breadth of life, knowledge, experience, contribution into the community that really makes up who I am as part of Yakima. And I have a lot to offer in terms of myself as a person, my level of integrity, my authenticity. I love this city. I can't put it any differently than that.
Well, I tell you, that's a pretty good resume and current experience and mindset for this city, and we wish you the very, very best of luck. You come through the primary, then we'll be chatting again prior
Thank
to
you.
the general election. So thanks for your time this morning.